I stood at the back of the church for almost 10 minutes before anyone even looked at me. It was my grandmother's funeral. The woman who raised me more than my own parents ever did. The woman who held my hand when I got my first period, who taught me how to cook, who let me sleep in her bed when I was scared of thunderstorms. And yet, when I walked through those heavy wooden doors, no one turned around. No one waved me over. No one saved me a seat. My older sister was sitting in the front row with her husband and 2 kids, right next to my parents. My brother was on the other side with his wife. My aunts and uncles filled the next few rows. They were all talking in low voices, some even smiling like this was just another family gathering. Not one of them looked back to see if I had arrived. I ended up standing against the wall near the back, holding my purse tightly against my stomach. I was wearing the black dress my grandmother had bought me 2 years ago for my cousin's wedding. She had said it made me look elegant. Now it just made me feel invisible. If you've ever shown up to say goodbye to the person you loved most in the world, only to realize that the rest of your family would rather pretend you don't exist, then you already know how cold a church can feel, even when it's packed with people. The minister finally stepped up to the podium. The room quieted down. He cleared his throat and looked out over everyone with a gentle but serious expression. "Before we begin the service," he said, "Mrs. Margaret Thompson left one final message. She asked that it be read today in front of everyone she loved." A ripple went through the crowd. Some people shifted in their seats. My mother turned slightly and whispered something to my father. My sister's husband leaned over and said something that made my sister glance back at me for half a second before quickly looking away again. I felt my heart start to beat faster. The minister opened a white envelope. The paper inside looked old and slightly wrinkled, like it had been folded and unfolded many times. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "To my family. If you are hearing this, then I am already gone. I have spent the last few years watching all of you, and there are some things I need to say before I go." He paused for a moment, then continued reading. His voice was calm, but every word felt heavier than the last. I stood frozen against the wall, barely breathing, because I already knew, deep in my gut, that whatever my grandmother had written in that letter was going to change everything. And from the way some members of my family were suddenly sitting very, very still, they knew it too. The minister kept reading, and with every sentence, the air in the church seemed to grow heavier. "I have watched how some of you treated my granddaughter Emily these past few years. I have seen the way you spoke about her when you thought I couldn't hear. I have seen how you tried to push her away from me, and how you tried to make her feel small in her own family." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My mother's back straightened. My older sister crossed her arms tightly over her chest. My uncle, who had been nodding along politely just moments ago, suddenly looked down at his hands. I stayed where I was, pressed against the wall at the back of the church. My fingers were digging into the strap of my purse so hard that my knuckles had turned white. The minister continued. "Emily was the only one who stayed with me when I got sick. She was the only one who came without asking for anything in return. She cooked for me. She cleaned my house. She sat with me when the pain kept me awake at night. And some of you had the nerve to say she was only doing it for my money." A low murmur rippled through the rows in front of me. Someone coughed loudly, trying to cover it up. I saw my brother lean over and whisper something sharp to his wife. She shook her head quickly, like she didn't want to be associated with whatever was being said. The minister's voice didn't waver. "I am not a fool. I knew what was happening. That is why 2 years ago I changed my will. And because I suspected that some of you might try to interfere after I was gone, I made sure there was a second copy." He paused again. This time, the silence in the church was almost suffocating. "That second copy," the minister read slowly, "is not with my lawyer. It is with someone I trust completely, someone who has no reason to lie to any of you. And today, that person is here." The minister looked up from the paper and scanned the room. His eyes eventually landed on an older woman sitting quietly in the third row on the left side. I recognized her immediately. Mrs. Rivera, the neighbor who lived 2 houses down from my grandmother. She was in her late 70s, always kind, always brought soup whenever anyone was sick. She and my grandmother had been close for over 30 years. Mrs. Rivera slowly stood up. In her hands was a thick brown envelope. The entire church seemed to hold its breath. The minister nodded at her gently. "Mrs. Rivera, if you would please come forward." She walked slowly down the aisle, her shoes making soft sounds against the wooden floor. When she reached the front, she handed the envelope to the minister with both hands, like she was giving him something sacred. He opened it carefully. Inside was another will, the real one. And right there, in front of everyone, the minister began to read the first line. "To my granddaughter Emily Thompson, who never asked for anything, but still gave me everything." The moment the minister read the first line of the real will, the entire church changed. It was like someone had suddenly turned off the air. People stopped shifting in their seats. Some leaned forward. Others sat frozen, as if moving would somehow make what was happening less real. "To my granddaughter, Emily Thompson," the minister continued, his voice steady and clear, "who stayed by my side when others only came when it was convenient. To the only person in this family who treated me like a human being instead of a bank account." I could feel eyes turning toward me from every direction. My mother's face had gone completely pale. My older sister was gripping the edge of the pew so tightly her knuckles were white. My uncle kept clearing his throat like he was trying to find something to say, but no words came out. The minister kept reading. "Because I knew that some members of this family would try to change my wishes after I was gone, I took precautions. 2 years ago, I created a second will and gave it to my dear friend and neighbor, Mrs. Elena Rivera, for safekeeping. The will you may have seen or heard about is not the real one. This is." He held up the document in his hands. A wave of whispers broke out across the church. I heard someone gasp. Someone else muttered, "This can't be happening." My brother turned around in his seat and stared at me with wide, angry eyes, like this was somehow my fault. The minister didn't stop. "To my granddaughter Emily, I leave the house on Maple Street, all of my savings, and the small collection of jewelry that belonged to my mother. These things are hers, freely and without condition. To the rest of my family," he paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch, "I leave you my love, and I leave you this warning. Do not try to take what does not belong to you. Do not punish Emily for loving me when the rest of you could not. If any of you attempt to contest this will or harm her in any way, you will receive nothing, not even my forgiveness." The minister folded the paper slowly and looked out over the crowd. My mother suddenly stood up. Her voice was shaking. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly. Mother was confused at the end. She didn't know what she was doing. "This will isn't valid." "Sit down, Margaret," Mrs. Rivera said from where she stood near the front. Her voice was calm but firm. Your mother was sharper than any of you gave her credit for. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly what kind of people some of you had become. The church went dead silent again. I was still standing at the back, unable to move. My legs felt weak. My chest felt tight. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. For the first time since I walked into this church, people were looking at me, and none of them were laughing anymore. After the minister finished reading the real will, the church didn't empty right away. People stayed in their seats whispering to each other. Some were crying. Some were arguing in low, angry voices. My mother had stormed out with my father right behind her. My older sister stayed seated for a long time, staring straight ahead like she was trying to process what had just happened. I was still standing at the back when Mrs. Rivera walked up to me. She didn't say anything at first. She just reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "Your grandmother loved you very much," she said quietly. "She told me more than once that you were the only one who made her feel like she still mattered." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt too tight. Mrs. Rivera looked around at the remaining people, then back at me. "Come to my house tomorrow," she said. "There are some things your grandmother wanted you to have, things she didn't trust anyone else to give you." I managed a small "thank you" before she walked away. As I turned to leave, my brother stepped in front of me. His face was red. "You did this," he hissed. "You turned her against us. You manipulated her when she was old and confused." I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. "No," I said calmly. "I just stayed, while the rest of you only showed up when you wanted something." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I walked past him before he could speak. Outside, the sky had turned gray. It looked like it might rain. I stood on the church steps for a moment, breathing in the cool air. My hands were still shaking, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from everything I had just heard. My grandmother had known. She had seen how they treated me. She had seen how they only cared about her money, and instead of staying silent, she had done something about it. She had protected me from beyond the grave. I got into my car and sat there for a long time without starting the engine. I thought about all the nights I had spent at her house, holding her hand when the pain was bad. All the mornings I made her breakfast. All the times I listened to her stories about my grandfather and the life they built together. They had called me names behind my back. They had tried to push me out. But in the end, my grandmother had made sure they couldn't take everything from me. I started the car and drove away from the church. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I had lost someone. I felt like I had finally been seen. The next morning, I went to Mrs. Rivera's house like she asked. She lived in a small, tidy home 2 streets away from where my grandmother used to live. When I knocked, she opened the door with a gentle smile and invited me inside. The house smelled like fresh coffee and old books. She led me to the living room and handed me a small wooden box. "This is from your grandmother," she said. "She gave it to me 6 months before she passed. She said if anything happened to her, I should make sure you got it personally." I opened the box slowly. Inside were 3 things: a stack of handwritten letters from my grandmother to me, letters she had written over the years but never sent, a small velvet pouch containing her favorite pearl necklace and a pair of earrings I had always admired as a child, and at the very bottom, a single folded piece of paper with my name on it. I opened it. It was another letter, written in her shaky but still elegant handwriting. "Emily, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the truth has finally come out. I knew they would try to take everything from you. I knew they would try to make you feel like you didn't belong. That is why I made sure there were two versions of my will. The one they tried to use was fake. The real one was always with Elena. You were never just my granddaughter. You were the daughter I never had. You stayed when others left. You loved me when others only saw what I could give them. I am sorry I could not protect you more while I was alive. But I hope this gives you the freedom to finally live without them holding you back. Be happy, my dear girl. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Love always, Grandma. I read the letter 3 times before I could stop crying. Mrs. Rivera sat quietly across from me the entire time, giving me space. When I finally looked up, she reached over and patted my hand. She was proud of you, she said, even when she couldn't say it out loud. I nodded, wiping my eyes. We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me stories about my grandmother that I had never heard before. How she used to sneak out to see my grandfather when they were young. How she cried the day I was born. How she worried about me after my parents got divorced. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel alone. 2 weeks after the funeral, I moved into my grandmother's house. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms that still smelled like her perfume and the lavender soap she always used. But it also felt right, like I was finally coming home to a place that had always been waiting for me. I didn't invite any of my family over. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even the ones who suddenly wanted to talk after the will was read. I needed time. Time to grieve my grandmother properly. Time to understand what had really happened. Some of them tried to reach out anyway. My older sister sent me a long message saying she was hurt that I hadn't shared the inheritance with the rest of the family. My brother called twice and left voicemails about how unfair everything was. My mother even showed up at the house one afternoon with a casserole and a forced smile, like we could just pretend the last few years never happened. I didn't let her in. I stood on the porch and told her, calmly, that I needed space, that I wasn't ready to forgive what they had done, not just to me, but to my grandmother's memory. She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped her. She left without saying another word. The house was quiet after that. I spent my days going through my grandmother's things slowly. I found old photo albums, recipe cards written in her handwriting, and boxes of letters she had saved over the years. In one of them, I discovered she had kept every birthday card I ever made her as a child. It broke my heart and healed it at the same time. One evening, while I was sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, Mrs. Rivera came over. She brought a pie and sat with me for a while without saying much. Before she left, she looked at me and said something I will never forget. "Your grandmother didn't leave you the house because she felt sorry for you," she said. "She left it because she knew you would take care of it the way she did, and because she wanted you to finally have a place where you belonged." I cried after she left, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in a very long time, I believed her. My grandmother couldn't protect me while she was alive, but she made sure she protected me after she was gone, and in doing that, she gave me something even more valuable than the house. She gave me back my voice, and I was never going to let anyone take it from me again.